Welcome to another episode of The Unseen Paranormal, where some of the scariest things are unseen. I'm your host, Eric Freeman. Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of this 2-part season finale with the amazing Andrea Perron. We're going to finish our conversation today, and like I said, this is season finale. We will be back at the end of July to start season 2. So in the meantime, catch up on all past episodes, and we'll see you then. You also had a spirit that would sweep up, which I find interesting. That's not something that you hear.
Yeah, I think she was kind of aggravated with us because, it was a farm and we were outside, we had our chukka boots on and we would drag dirt into the house all the time. And we almost always came through the kitchen door. And so she would sweep and sweep and sweep the kitchen. And we had an old black stove, which granted it didn't burn, but, a few months out of the year that my mother would actually throw wood in it and use it for heat. But my mother would say, don't put the straw broom next to the wood stove. Right. That's dangerous. Don't do that. And, we'd all be like, Mom, we didn't do it. We didn't do it. Well, she's like, well, it got there somehow. And then one day we saw her place the broom next to the stove instead of behind the second pantry door where all the other cleaning supplies and stuff were stored. And that's where, I guess, in her lifetime, she would put the broom.
Yeah.
And my sister Nancy started calling her the kitchen witch, but my mother admonished her about that right away and said, that's not a word you throw around, and that's not nice, and, you have to be respectful. And I'm sure she's, somehow attached to this house, and she had a name, and you're not using it. So if you don't know who it is, and we don't know who it is, then don't call her that. Don't call her anything. The broom lady. I mean, once my mother understood that the house had numerous spirits in it, she had to kind of wrap her mind around that first. And then once she did, she said, I don't believe that they're just passing through. I think that, they belong here somehow, some way, that this was their house. And so we're the ones that have infested their house with all these mortal souls. And, so, who can blame them for wanting some peace and quiet in their house, because right. Mr. Kenyon had lived there very quietly with his wife, and his son was all grown up. He was a banker in town. And so, it had apparently been a very quiet, reserved kind of place. And it was a fascinating way to grow up, Eric. It was bizarre and unusual, and it took us a long time to really come to terms with what was happening there. And things were scary. There were times that, I never really had anything happen to me, at least not while I was awake, that were horrifying. But there were many, many incidents, and some of them were clearly malevolent. Clearly, there were things, there was a spirit in that house that hated my mother. And of course, so much of it is speculation, but, since we lived it, if anybody's going to speculate about it, it might as well be us.
Right.
And I think that she perceived my mother as a threat. I think that it was probably Mrs. Arnold, who was found hanging in the barn at the age of 97, who took her own life after her husband died. And her body was cut down and brought into the house. And she's buried in the old Arnold Cemetery. And, to say that suicide was frowned upon back in the 1700s is, the understatement of the new millennium.
Right.
And so if she was buried in hallowed ground, then there was no inkling from the family that she died by suicide.
Right.
But that's something that I'm sure was covered up. But, the whole idea of Bathsheba hanging from a tree in the backyard and all of that, that's all in the script
right.
of The Conjuring. But I'll tell you, there are things that found their way into that film that tell me it's what I've always referred to as the cosmic kisses of that film that tell me that it's okay the way that it is because, first of all, it is impossible to compress 10 years into 2 hours.
Right.
Absolutely impossible. Second of all, it's supposed to be based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, not the Perron family memoirs. So there's that. But there's a scene, I don't know, have you seen the film?
I have. Yeah, I have.
Okay. Well, you might remember a scene where the camera kind of on the second floor of the house kind of curves around and looks into what should have been my bedroom. Shanley Caswell plays me in the movie, and there's a picture of a white cat, a folk art drawing of a white cat that's up on the mantel board in the bedroom. Nobody that worked on that set had any internal photographs of the house, didn't know what our personal belongings were at the time, and didn't know that that identical picture, and it could, for all I know, be paint by number. I mean, it literally could be. But that exact identical picture is sitting 2 feet away from me here in my office right now. And it was given to me for my 13th birthday when we lived at the farm from my mother's friend, Fran. Gave it to me, bought it for me while we were out at a flea market. And I've had it ever since.
Wow.
And for them to have that exact picture sitting up on the mantel board next to a wooden peace sign hanging on the wall, identical to one that I've had since I was a kid. I was a hippie wannabe from like way back, way back. You know, that those were the items that they chose, that the set designer chose to decorate my bedroom in the film is absolutely bizarre. Bizarre. And there's a scene where Cindy's running through the house with a set of wind chimes that she's going to go hang on the porch. And we had an identical set of wind chimes that were hanging on our front porch at the farm. There's no way that they could have known that. There's no way out of 25,000 plus different designs of wallpaper that they chose the exact wallpaper that we had at the farm. There's no way. And so it was like there were cosmic forces at work in the making of The Conjuring. And even though the film does not portray our family precisely how we were, it does not portray the events how they happened, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for it because had it not been for The Conjuring, our real story, our true story, would be languishing in obscurity like 1,000 other books, 1,000,000 other books out there that got written and nobody really read.
Right.
You know, it was the power of a feature film that brought our truth to light. And so I'm grateful, and I always will be, for everybody that worked on it and threw their heart and soul into making it. It was a real wake-up call for James Wan. And I'll tell you what, my head blew off my shoulders the day that the executive producer called me and told me that he was the director that they chose.
Yeah.
So I had not ever seen any of his films. I only knew him by reputation. And I knew that he had made the Saw movie. And I hate films like that. I hate slasher films. I think that they poison minds. And I know there's a lot of people probably listening to this that say, oh, no, Andrea, come on. You know, everybody knows it's not real and blah, blah, blah. But I can't help it. I really do believe that on some subliminal level, it's like poisoning your consciousness just to watch things like that. And so I said, oh, great. This is what I said verbatim to the executive producer. Oh, that's just great, Rob. You just hired the king of slasher porn to make my intimate family story. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, yeah, I think I do understand. And what you've done is you've hired a guy that makes blood and gore movies to tell my family's story. And he said, no, no, he's an aficionado of the paranormal, and he's, been a follower of the Warrens for years and years. And I'm looking at this guy thinking, okay, he looks like he's 14 years old.
Right.
So how many years and years are you talking about? And in fact, he didn't know what to make of our story because he had never heard of it. And the reason that he had never heard of it was because my mother told the Warrens that they could not write a book about it and that they could not make a movie about it. And that happened after we left the house. And there was a situation that occurred at our new home in Georgia that was life-threatening to my mother, that happened the night that Lorraine Warren called her and said, we want to offer you what was at the time a boatload of money, like life-altering money, to tell our story. And my mother said no, and Lorraine said, well, you at least owe it to your husband, to discuss this with him. This, is truly, truly a good offer, a really good offer. And my mother said, well, I'll talk to him about it, but you know how I feel. I wanted to leave that behind. I don't want to ever deal with that again. And then that night, in a new house that had only been built like 12 years before we moved into it, my mother was attacked in the cellar of the house.
Wow.
Doing a load of laundry, and was very seriously hurt. And when Lorraine called back the next day, she told her, she said, nope, all done here. I don't need to discuss this with my husband. My decision is made, and please don't ever call me again. And so that's how it was left with the Warrens. Just like, the night of, they came and kind of foisted a seance upon my parents and insisted to my father that my mother was oppressed, and if they didn't do it, that she could, go into full-blown possession. And the medium that they brought conjured up the spirits by throwing open wide the doors to the netherworld and inviting everything in. And something purely evil came through and attacked my mother that night and had all the power that it needed to kill her. It didn't want to kill her. It would have. It wanted to make its presence known to everybody else in the house, and it did so. And that was the last time that the Warrens were actually in the farmhouse. They came a couple of months later, after my father threw them out that night. It was very ugly. It was a very, very ugly scene. And, my father behaved very badly, but I don't think that anybody could blame him for being as upset as he was.
Right.
And they came back a couple of months later and came to the kitchen door after they made sure that Dad's car wasn't there, and he wasn't there. But they came back to see if my mother was still alive, because when they left the house that night, they didn't know she was unconscious on the parlor floor.
Yeah, and you've said that's the worst thing you've ever experienced in your entire life, of all the things
in my entire life. Yeah. And I've been to hell and back in my life, mostly because of, alive and well human beings,
right.
that have behaved badly. But of all the experiences I've had over 62 years of life, nothing even compares to it. Doesn't even hold a candle to it. It was horrible. I really did think I saw my mom die that night.
Yeah, just a horrific turn of events, and it kind of ratcheted everything up for a long time as well.
Yeah, it did. It did. But people think that The Conjuring is the end-all, be-all, and it barely scratches the surface of the story. And we lived there another 6+ years after the Warrens left, and they didn't know anything that happened about our family or the haunting or, any of the circumstances or incidents or anything. They knew nothing. So to say that their case files were limited, and there were events that did not reflect well on them, but, I really don't think that they ever tried to do anything to deliberately hurt our family. I will never believe that. I will never believe that.
Right.
And they've got their critics out there for sure, but my father felt like they were trying to take advantage, that they were exploiting our family, that they were going to different seminars around the country and talking very openly about what happened, even though they had a confidentiality agreement with my mom. And they did that. Yes, they did that. And I think that they did it because it was, according to Ed, it was the most intense, most compelling, most disturbing, and most significant of all of the investigations that they ever conducted over more than 40 years together as paranormal investigators. So naturally, they're going to talk about the story that changed them, that fundamentally changed them.
Right.
But, and they made mistakes. They were human beings.
Right.
All human beings make mistakes. But I knew both of those individuals, and not for a moment do I believe that they had any intention of doing anything but trying to help our family. It's just that even by Mrs. Warren's own admission, they were in over their heads the moment they crossed the threshold of that farm.
Yeah.
They had never encountered anything like it. They never encountered anything like it after.
Yeah, and they're just working with what they had seen previously, and the fact that this is something completely out of the realm of anything they could probably even imagine at the time. Yeah, they were just doing the best with what they had at the time.
Right, exactly. And they came from a very, very specific point of view. Everything about them was angels and demons. It was very Roman Catholic centered kind of understanding. The thing about the film that I found most difficult I understand why they tried to juxtapose the devout Roman Catholic Warrens against the godless heathen Perrons, and why they did that. But, just to draw kind of a line of demarcation between our lack of a belief system and their devout belief system.
Yeah.
But that was not the case at all. And Ed was literally the only layman on the planet at the time that had been trained to assist in an exorcism. He would never, his respect for the church and for the exorcist in the church was to such an extent that he would have considered it a slap in the face to them to try to conduct an exorcism on his own. Nothing he would have ever done. And the screenwriters knew that, but they had to come up with a script that would work, and that would work in less than 2 hours, and that people could interpret as good versus evil.
Yeah.
And so in the grand the Warrens offer, once he found out about it, about a book and a movie, because that would have been life-altering money for our family.
Right.
And, and he just didn't understand why she wasn't willing to talk about it or revisit it or anything. But over the years, I went back there many, many times. And up until the movie opened, I had what I thought was a friendship with the prior owner, who a couple of years ago sold the farm to the people that own it now. But then when the movie opened, she turned on my family like a viper. And after years of inviting one paranormal team after another into that house to investigate, she went on national TV and said, "Go away, no ghosts here. The Perron family made it all up." And she knew that was a bold-faced lie. She knew it. But she just wanted to make the scrutiny stop. And she took it too far. And, after years of chasing my mother around, trying to get her to write a book with her about the Harrisville house, past and present, and after years of listening to stories about what happened to my family at that house, and after years and years, 28 years, I knew her, of telling me all the things that happened in that house, she denied all of it. Well, our story never changed. Ever in 50 years. Our story never changed.
Right.
She's the one that did the complete about face. And it was because she felt threatened. And it was also because James Wan reneged on an agreement to use the house to film in. Because once he read my books, he said, "Oh, hell no. Under no circumstances are we filming at that house. In fact, I refused to step foot in Rhode Island." And he chose another house in North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, instead, because he was afraid. He didn't want to go there. He's actually, and self-admittedly, chicken. He was really afraid to go to the house.
Yeah.
But because of that, the prior owner lost a ton of money that they were going to pay her to use the property to film on, at least the external filming. And so she was angry, and she felt like she'd been robbed, and she went on national television. And she said that I never told her that there was going to be a movie made. And yet, I guess she conveniently forgot that she's the one that fielded the original phone call from the original producer, and then called me and asked if she could give him my phone number. She conveniently forgot a lot of things. She conveniently forgot that we talked about a movie being made about the story, and I have it on film. It's on my YouTube channel. She just forgot, I guess, that she had been all in. She forgot that she had bought dozens of my books and given them to all of her friends and family with me signing them for them, and raved and raved and raved about the books until it no longer suited her purposes. And part of me thinks that she was afraid because she had run that house as a business. And part of the time that she lived there, she ran it as a daycare. And she was afraid that there would be blowback from parents who put their children at that house without her disclosing things that happened in that house. In fact, if you watched Kindred Spirits with Amy and Adam and Chip, they discovered a toy box that she had discarded down in the cellar. I never knew anything about it.
Yeah, they asked you about it because of some of the drawings that were in it.
Yeah, and there was a drawing of a woman with an obviously broken neck. Those children saw things in that house, and I know that for a fact because once I started releasing the books, I started getting letters from people who worked for her in that house, and didn't last but a week or two before they had experiences or saw the children have experiences that were completely untenable to them, and they could not work in that environment, and they were frightened, and they left. So she played hell keeping child care workers there. And I think that she thought about it and thought, this could be a problem for me. And, maybe that's why she reacted the way that she did. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. I know that she kind of lost it.
Yeah.
And, but I knew her, and I knew her husband. Her husband, rest his soul, was one of the kindest people that I've ever met. Just absolutely brilliant and wonderful and sweet and generous. And he was a lovely, lovely human being. And I'm sorry that everything happened the way that it did, but I am not the one that put her address out there. Somebody found it and posted it on the internet when the movie came out, and people started coming to the house, and it shattered their peace of mind, and they had to put up no trespassing signs all over the place. And Warner Brothers, because of my request, asked if they could help and provide her some security. And when they called her about providing her free security at that farm, she was so nasty to them that they basically said, "You know what, lady, you're on your own. We didn't even use your house to film at. It's not our fault what's happening, and
Right.
handle it your own way," because she was, really hateful to them. And they were offering at their own expense to provide her security at the farmhouse. And, that all subsided in relative short order, although she, made more out of it than it was, because I know police officers in Burrowville, and, I have friends there who said, that they didn't get nearly as many calls for assistance as she claims, and all of that. But, I've had to let go of all of that because, she doesn't own the place anymore, and she can throw as many temper tantrums as she wants, and she can make as many horrible videos as she wants. It doesn't matter. I mean, our story, in some way, shape, or form, has been in print since the early 80s. Tom D'Agostino wrote a book, and I know Tom. He's a friend of mine now. He wrote a book called Haunted Rhode Island in the early 80s, and he wrote about the farmhouse and things that happened with my family there. And then Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who is probably the most prolific writer in the paranormal of all time, included the story, what she knew of the story, in the Encyclopedia of Ghosts and Spirits. Well before I ever started writing the story of what happened, directly to my family. So this is probably, and there are, numerous other mentions of it in a variety of books and outlets, and decades before I ever started telling our personal memoir. And, it's probably the most well documented story in haunted history, certainly in America, certainly that. And so, I offer no apologies. And, as far as I am concerned, I cut my relationship off with her because she called my mother a liar. And, I don't care what she says about me. I'm a big girl and I can take care of myself. But to attack my mother after all my mother has been through in her life was a declaration of war as far as I was concerned. And so I just cut her dead. I didn't go back to the farm for more than 6 years. I was there a few weeks before the film opened, and then I didn't go back again until 2019. So it was, once she sold it, and she sold it to paranormal investigators, and then
Yeah.
freaked out when they started, opening it for other people to investigate it. Well, she's the one that called the ghost hunters, and she's the one that called the, this team and that team and the other team. And why would you call paranormal investigators to come film at your home or do research on your home if there was absolutely nothing happening there?
Right.
It's counterintuitive, and so for people who question our veracity about this story, let me assure you that I would not have devoted 7 years of my life, in the prime of my life, to the exclusion of all else, to tell a story that was one big fat elaborate lie and then make my family memorize it and swear to it.
Right.
That's delusional. That would be the delusional thing. It's Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the true one.
Right.
And the truth is that the time came that I felt like it was time to tell our story. And when I told my mother that I was compiling the different incidents and kind of, just kind of structuring it, putting it together, and I told her about it, and I had been working on it for months before I told anybody in my family about it because I didn't want anybody to discourage me from doing it. I felt that it was a story worthy of telling. And when I told my mom, she said, this is the kind of story that it wouldn't be right to take it to the grave. This is too important. If the spirits exist, it's not who they were when they were alive, that they still are.
Right.
Is the miracle, that they still are. I don't understand groups that bring mediums into houses to try to move the spirits along, to send them on their way, to send them to the light. Why are they here and what do they have to teach us? Those are the questions that I ask. When people say, how many children, Eric, I've thought about this a lot. Think about the course of human history. How many kids have gotten up in the morning and said, Mommy, Grandma came to visit me last night and she read me a bedtime story.
Yeah.
And the parent will say, oh no, your grandmother died before you were born, honey, we're just having a dream, or, that was not real, or, and just like shut that child's third eye closed.
Right.
Just shut them down because they are the authority figure. And if mommy and daddy say it's not real, then it can't be real. When the actual appropriate questions to ask would be, she did? What was she wearing? How long did she stay? What did she read to you? What did she say? Did she mention me?
Right.
Right. I mean, these
Yeah.
are the questions to ask a child that is coming in. If you've raised your children to be honest, then for God's sake, why don't you try to believe them when they're telling you the truth about an experience that they had? And so many people that are in the paranormal now that, think that they've got, some kind of mediumship or, they have psychic abilities. Well, all of us have that.
Yeah.
But most of us have had that shut down by somebody, an elder, when we were a child and these experiences first began to happen to us and we weren't believed. And so, nobody wants to be called a liar. Nobody wants to be told that they have too vivid an imagination or, you're just daydreaming I mean, give you 100 different reasons why that can't have happened. Well, maybe it did happen. And maybe the questions to ask are entirely different than just telling your kid to sit down, shut up, and eat your breakfast.
Yeah.
It just seems to me that we do this to ourselves, I guess is the best way to put it. I think that, there is no veil between this realm and the next. That's a self-imposed barrier so that we can continue to live in our little eggshell, in our little three-dimensional eggshell, when that is not the truth of our existence, and we live in a multidimensional universe. And when you open your mind to the possibilities of what that means, it completely alters your perceptions entirely. And you never ever go back to living in limited mindset ever.
Yeah, I've talked openly on my show here about how I'm proud to have come from a family that they didn't try to teach me out of it. I wasn't taught out of believing in the paranormal. I actually grew up in a family that openly talked about the paranormal and experience they had in an old house.
Wow.
I was raised by my grandparents, and I was their 10th kid. So the other 9 kids, of course, are my aunts and uncles who are way older than me. But they remember when they moved to Tennessee that they lived in this old house, and they all had experiences, and they were all very open in my family. And now I realize, being older, that, like you said, and I've talked about it extensively with quite a few guests on the show here, about kids being taught out of it because it either scares the parents or it's not their beliefs, or
Right.
yeah. And I'm very fortunate to come from a family that never was like that, never shut it down like that with any of our members of our family.
Well, you were blessed. You truly were. And it was because I'm assuming that you had experiences when you were a youngster that you shared and that led you down the path that you have taken lifelong.
Yes. Yeah. My first experience was seeing a full body apparition at 8 years old.
Yeah. And it does fundamentally alter you for life.
Yeah.
Once you realize what you saw and that it's something entirely different than anything you've ever experienced before, it makes you think differently about everything. Not just that thing, that one experience, but about your place in the universe and
Right.
how it all works and what does this mean. And, our house got a lot more peaceful once we acknowledged them, once we began to talk to them and let them know that we saw them. And it got a lot more peaceful. It didn't stop the activity at all. But what it did, well, you've read the book, so you know that there's the house of light as well as the house of darkness. I mean, we've had,
Right.
we had experiences where, I would be sitting in the parlor and I was playing my guitar and singing, and all of a sudden the rocking chair in the dining room would start rocking back and forth, exactly in rhythm to the music. And when I stopped playing, the rocking chair would stop, and when I'd start playing, the rocking chair would rock.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, somebody's sitting in that rocking chair. Play on.
Yeah.
Somebody besides myself and my family are enjoying this piece of music. Play on.
Yeah.
You just get to a point where you get used to it. that you understand that you're living in shared space, that you understand that not everything is what it seems, that there's more to the story. And once we got through the worst of things, and once my mother healed and came back to us, and we began to function more as a family unit again, and she wasn't so preoccupied, I guess, with her own thoughts and what she had experienced. Once she was able to reconcile what she did, it brought her peace of mind, and it created a more peaceful environment in the house. And it got to the point where we could even laugh about it. Bizarre things would happen, and it's like, oh my God, you'll never believe, we
Right,
just got
right.
to a whole different. And I often tell people, when I lecture and doing different interviews, there are no experts in the paranormal, none. And if you run into somebody that proclaims themselves to be, run away from them, because not
Yes,
only are they lying to you, they're obviously lying to themselves.
yes,
Because if my family doesn't know, then no one does. To live in that environment, steeped in that environment for a decade, and we can't tell you exactly what it is that we experienced. We can only tell you what the experiences were like. We can't tell you where they generated from. We can't tell you if they were residual energy or they were interdimensional. We can't tell you if it was extraterrestrial. We can't, well, I guess all spirits are extraterrestrial. But, we don't know. And I don't think, honestly, Eric, I don't think we're supposed to know. I really don't. I don't think we're supposed to know. I think that they're here to teach us that there is something beyond our mortal existence, but we don't
right,
know precisely what that is. And it is that curiosity factor, it is that fascination that keeps us learning and yearning to know more and forwards the momentum of the field. All existing science was once considered pseudoscience,
right,
and paranormal investigation is still considered pseudoscience. But eventually, someday, someone is going to invent a machine, probably closely akin to what we call a spirit box, where you will literally be able to have a full blown conversation with loved ones on the other side. That will eventually happen. It might not happen in my lifetime or yours, but I do believe that we will all eventually come to understand that not only are we not alone in the universe, but that those that we have loved and lost, we never really lost at all. Their
right,
physical vessel may have died, but that the soul is eternal, that there is some part and parcel of them that goes on in another realm. And when I lost my baby sister in 2017, I was never more grateful to have grown up in the environment in which I did. Because when she came to me, I knew it immediately. I recognized it immediately as being April. There she was. And I don't know if that would have been the case. I mean, you've read the books, you know that you literally have to suspend disbelief. If I hadn't lived it and read those books written by someone else, I can't tell you honestly that I would believe the story, because there are literally incidents that occurred in that farmhouse that are actually beyond belief,
right,
and you have to either accept it or not. But I open that trilogy of books telling my reader, I am not here to convince you of anything. Believe what you will. I'm not going to try to coerce you. I am simply going to lay out, this is what happened, how it happened, when it happened, period, and take it for what it is worth to you. Integrate it, believe or not. It is entirely up to you, but it is my fervent hope that it has served a purpose not only in illuminating the opening hearts and minds and, being a point of illumination in a dark world, but also that it has been liberating for those who have had experiences of their own that they never told anyone because they were so fearful of being admonished or, called a liar or thought to be insane. And, all the reasons why we don't express the experiences that happen to us in life because we're so afraid of being rejected, especially by people that we love and admire. And so if my trilogy of books serves the purpose of liberating people to speak their truth, then it has served its purpose well on this planet at this time.
Yeah. I have one last question for you, and then we'll kind of close the show here. With your love of the property and the farm, and with the current owners kind of being open and admitting that they bought it out of the sheer purpose to let investigators in there, do you think it's something that should be studied and that paranormal teams should be allowed in there to do what they do?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. Honestly, it is. And I warned them about that, and I told them to be very selective, very careful about who they let in, not to let people come in there and provoke anything because it will just, make their lives a living hell, and that they need to be careful about who they allow in and what they allow to happen in the house. On the other side of that coin, every time someone posts new evidence that they've gotten from that farmhouse, not that I require it, but it certainly does serve to vindicate and validate my family's story.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, I guess, it's I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that. I really do. I feel very protective toward the farm.
Yeah.
It's like I did that episode of Ghost Adventures with Zach and his whole crew, and I was brought up there under the pretense of doing an interview with them, and I had no idea that they were going to ask me to give them the tour of the farmhouse. I stayed there for, I guess, 4 or 5 hours, but they were there for days. And I told them, I don't even remember in the show if my warning was recorded and used or not, but I absolutely told Zach and the team, do not provoke in this house. Woe be unto you if you do.
Yeah.
And when I saw the show, I was disturbed. I was disturbed by what I saw. I was disturbed by the way that Carl Johnson behaved. I was disturbed about some of the things that went on during their investigation. I felt like they were not being as respectful of the places they should have been. I mean, to me, that's sacred ground. It is. It's holy land. And I want everybody to treat it with love and tenderness. And because I am not in control of who comes and goes out of that house, it leaves me with a feeling in the pit of my stomach like, oh my God, I know about that group. I'll hear somebody's going in for, an overnight investigation, and the owners are going to be, going off to their part of the house and just giving them free reign. So they're not being monitored. They're not being, what they're saying and what they're doing is not being scrutinized in any way. And I'll be sitting, I'll open up Facebook and I'm like, oh my God, they let that team in. Oh my God,
Yeah.
and so it's, I mean, like the ink on their T-shirts not dry yet, declaring themselves as the world's leading experts in the paranormal, and I'm like, oh no, but there's nothing I can do about it because I don't own the farm.
Right.
It's so it really is the proverbial catch-22. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 I completely understand. With my show here, I preach all the time that, your intention is everything. Going to any place any place. And respect is paramount as a paranormal investigator. Go in and be respectful because these people lived and they're still living in a way. And it's very
Yeah,
important that you go in with that intention. And, they were once people too. And we would want the same respect if we, somebody came in at our house, we'd want that respect. And so just because they're on a different plane than we are doesn't mean they don't deserve that.
exactly right. I completely agree with you. It's one of the reasons that I adore you, my dear.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been an amazing conversation. You've been an awesome guest. I've enjoyed it so much. Everybody can check out your online show, A World
Yeah,
Awakening. You have an episode every week. You have amazing guests on there. I'm looking forward to being a guest on there and talking to you about my experiences.
I can't wait. I'll get you booked up, sweetheart. I will.
Yeah, we'll get that done. And everybody can find House of Darkness, House of Light, the whole trilogy on Amazon and Kindle and wherever fine books are sold. And you also have another book out as well that you kind of mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I wrote a book with George R. Lopez. It was his idea. It's a brilliant book. I did the legwork, getting the words down on the page, but it was entirely his idea. I would never have come up with it in a bajillion years. But it's called In a Flicker. And if you're a fan of time travel and Jack the Ripper, then it's a must read. And I'm selling my latest book privately. I don't have it out on Amazon yet. Something, how can I put this? Someone told me not to put it out publicly yet. And it wasn't until last year that I realized why. It's called A Wonder to Behold. The subtitle is Guideposts to Intergalactic Engagement with Humanity. It is all about my experiences with extraterrestrials lifelong since I was a child, which is probably why I had no trouble seeing the spirits in the house because I already see interdimensionally and multidimensionally. So, no problem seeing them.
Right.
And,
Right.
but a lot of the book is about the forthcoming paradigm shift. And then voila, here it was. I realized when this coronavirus emerged and altered the face of humanity that here it is. This is it. This is the paradigm shift. And so I have since written over the past year or so about my experience of it and all that it entails and all of the information that's been coming out of the government and the Department of Defense around the extraterrestrial presence. And I'm about to release it into the world in an extended hardcover edition. But if anybody wants the original first edition, I've got it. You can contact me directly, and I ship them out all the time. But yeah, I wasn't quite ready, and I didn't know why. I could be selling these books hand over fist,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it has got so much that's considered controversial in it, and it's got so much that frankly is going to piss off the government when they read it. That something told me to just wait, and I'm glad that I did. I published it in August of 2019, and a few months later, the whole world changed.
Yeah.
And so I spent the last year not only processing this incredible shift in consciousness in the world, but writing about it. So I've added a boatload of pictures. I've added a boatload of text and a whole nother chapter to it, and it'll be coming out very soon.
Awesome. I look forward to reading it for sure.
Well, I'll have to come back on your show and we'll just do a whole nother podcast about the extraterrestrial presence that is circumnavigating this globe in numbers that people cannot even wrap their minds around.
That would be
It
great.
is the most important part of my life. They are the reason that I get up every morning when I could just lay around and eat bonbons in bed and watch news. I get up so that I can go outside and say good morning. Thank you for coming. I love you. Get down here and help us. We're really in a mess down here, and we are, and they are helping, and they're helping in extraordinary ways. So we'll do a whole nother show about that, and I will bring you on a World Awakening, and you can share your story with my viewers and it will be blissful, my friend.
All right. Once again, thank you so much, Andrea, for coming on today. Everybody, I will put links to all of her social media and her website, House of Darkness, House of Light, and to the Amazon links where you can find her books. Once again, thank you so much. You have a great day.
You too, sweetheart. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, stay safe out there. Have a good day. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or at our website, unseenparanormalpodcast.com. And don't forget to like, review, rate, and share with all your friends. Thank you to my friend Chris Lips for the awesome theme music. Listen to our theme song and more of his music at chrislipsmusic.com. And remember, some of the scariest things are unseen.